All systems are working. So happy Tara Day. Today's Tara Day. So this is Mother Tara over here in the center. And for those who've been here before, we've got new, or maybe who haven't been here before, we've got all these new cupboards. This is going to become our Tara wall. And Mother Tara there is going to be in the middle and surrounded by her entourage of 21 Taras. Wow, statues. So pretty amazing coming up. So Tara Day is usually one where it says it's good for long life. We do have a Tara Puja this afternoon at 2 o'clock. Everyone's welcome if you've got the stamina to stay around or opportunity, just letting you know that's on today. Yeah, so I think some people have newly joined us today. So welcome, welcome. And yeah, has everyone got the notes? Yeah. So if anybody, actually, if you're newly joining us, we'll get your email so that we can send you out the notes by the end of the class. It's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly immediately. So then we have some course notes and readings that go along with this, each of the Discovering Buddhism modules. So the one we're looking at now is all about karma. As I said last week, I'm not sure it's all about karma, only a Buddha knows that. But anyway, it is about karma, right? So last week we had a general look at what is karma and what different types of karma there are, which actually we're looking at in more detail as we go along this week and in subsequent weeks. So for those of you who do have the notes, we're on the page Practice of Mindfulness, page 3. So Sorry, just getting things organized here. Okay, so practice of mindfulness. We all hear about mindfulness, mindfulness, be mindful. And I quite like the kindfulness, actually, be kindful. Be kind in your mindfulness, which is more about our motivation. And so we say that, you know, through developing qualities of mindfulness, and what do we mean by that? There's probably hundreds of definitions of mindfulness, but we use the one of not forgetting the object or not remembering the object. So usually like in meditation, if you're meditating on the breath, it's staying focused on the breath, not on something else that comes into your head. But we also apply it in day-to-day life. So the qualities of mindfulness and alertness in meditation, through that we're more aware of different aspects of our actions. So I was previously, before here, mainly in Sydney at Vajrayana Institute. Now, first Tibetan Lama there, who's since passed, Geshe Dawa, spoke at the first Mind and its Potential conference the centre put on in 2005, and said that he had been told by another Lama, if you want to get enlightened, practice mindfulness. So when you hear mindfulness, you think there's a lot going for it, right? Practice mindfulness. I was so inspired by just hearing those words that the next morning I thought, right, I got out of bed and I thought, I'm going to stay mindful. I'm going to stay, if I'm in this room, I'm going to stay in this room. And that being alertness, being mindful, not forgetting, I think that lasted about 15 minutes. Maybe I'm exaggerating even that, actually, before my mind was downstairs while I'm making breakfast while I was still upstairs in my room. So it's a good practice, right? Just to develop that and appreciating what that has to do in relation to karma. So in the foundation of all good qualities, Lama Tsongkhapa says, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. So packaging these together, great caution, great carefulness. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratamoksha vows. So the Pratamoksha vows are the vows we take. Usually people say the refuge vows, but the refuge vow is itself a vow. And then what comes along is the 5, you know, no killing, no stealing, no lying, no sexual misconduct, no intoxicants. Those are called the individual liberation. That's what Pratamoksha means, vows. Okay. So don't worry if you haven't got all those. I mean, if you haven't committed all those to memory, we'll be looking at those in relation to karma today. So, yeah. So when we say those prayers and have an appreciation of karma and of the import of mindfulness for actually becoming enlightened, we can appreciate more and more how karma underlies everything we do. As we said last week, what does the word karma mean? Action, purely action. So everything we think, do, and say. All right, so today we're looking at what makes a complete karmic action, right? So the 4 different elements that are involved in a complete karmic action. So there's the basis, or we say the object of the action. So I was just thinking, if I invited Rob over to dinner, but I didn't. Actually, I don't dare. He's got the best chef at home. But if I were to, for example, that would be a wonderful, you know, sort of act of generosity, right? So I've got to have the object Rob. If I intend to invite Rob over, but instead I invite Yvonne, then that's not the correct object, we would say. Yvonne might be very happy, but the correct object would be Rob, right? So we have that, the basis, the object of the action. The same thing in relation to killing, that say terribly, I intend to kill Rob. Believe me, I do not, but just an example. And instead I kill Yvonne. That's not a complete action of killing because I made a mistake. I thought it was Rob, it was in the dark, it was Yvonne. So everyone's going to stay alive in this room, okay? Even saying that feels really awkward, doesn't it? Thinking that. So, so you have the object. You have an attitude, or you know, the mental thought, the state of, a state of mind, and that has 3 different aspects to it. One is perception or recognition. So I have to correctly, in either case, recognize Rob. So then we say, okay, I've correctly recognized this is Rob. Okay, so there has to be that. And then intention, we say motivation. We say motivation is the most important part of any karmic action, of any karma, of creating any karma, of any action at all, our motivation. So, for example, getting up in the morning and having the aspiration, may everything I think, do, and say today be of benefit to others. And I might have to correct that motivation throughout the day as I get forgetful, or, you know, somebody presses my buttons. Oh, that's right. I'm here to say, may everything I think, do, and say benefit to others. That's my job as a L-plate bodhisattva aspiring to be a Buddha, right? That's the job. So motivation or intention. So this is in relation to others, and as we go along and look at different examples, that we can talk about in relation to karma, the weightiness or heaviness of that intention. It might be, there might be no intention. For example, take killing. As I mentioned the example last week where Geshe Dawa said, you know, you, by accident, you know, we were upstairs in the Gompa at Vajrayana Institute. At those days it was upstairs. And he said, and Geshe said, you could not the pot plant off the ledge. Actually, we didn't keep pot plants on the ledge, but say you did, and it killed an ant or some other being below, then you could say there's no karma of killing, because why? There was no intention of doing the killing, right? So it wasn't, even by that aspect, a complete karma. So whether or not you collect negative karma in that instance, he said, is debatable, but there might be some negative karma. So you can see how mindfulness is important, so you don't go around knocking pot plants off ledges, isn't it? Mindfulness is very important. So that's the motivation. And then you have whatever quality of mind, whether it be a virtuous state of mind, like inviting Rob for dinner, or whether it be an afflictive state of mind, a deluded state of mind. So, which normally runs, whether it's out of anger or hatred or something, we do something regrettable. Definitely regrettable if we understand karma. Right. So that's the three aspects in relation to our state of mind, our attitude. That's how it's generally presented. And then there's the performance, the action, where you actually do it, right? And so in the one of killing, where you actually commit the deed of killing, and as we said, that, let's say, person dies before you do. If they don't die, if you die before them somehow, maybe in the days of dueling, maybe they both shot each other and one died, but the other one intended to kill the other one as well, then you don't have a complete action of killing because you've died before they did. It's very technical. Don't go around killing it, best way. But even that, to not go around killing, we have to have a lot of mindfulness, noticing the ants, noticing the little beings, around us. The big beings, easy to notice. The little ones, not so easy, is it? So they'll say, thank you very much for not treading on me. Fortunately, ants seem to be very communal, so there seems to be a group of them, so it's easier to notice than a single ant. Although I have seen a few, you see a single ant, you go, oh, and it's such a tiny thing. We can think it's inconsequential, but as we said last week in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, Pabonka Rinpoche says that if you don't purify that action of killing the ant, then within 14 days, it becomes as heavy as the karma of killing a human being. You won't be thrown in jail, but karmically. So it's a very subtle energy we're talking about, this sort of karmic imprints. And it said that, by our actions, we habituate to certain ways of acting. So even we could say mindlessness, which is probably most of the time, it's a habituation of the mind. Right? Particularly if you find mindfulness a hard training, which is why we train in it. Don't have to train in mindlessness, got enough of that as it is. But mindfulness. So, for example, when I was had the great honor to be at Lama Zopa Rinpoche's house in Aptos in California. Rinpoche was elsewhere. Excuse me. But what happens is that there are many, many offerings made on every ledge, every conceivable horizontal surface. So many, and it's upstairs and downstairs. So I think it was three nuns, myself and two others, 5 hours every day making offerings, or the water bowl offerings, some very huge, some small, some teeny, in all the different rooms and on the land, the stairs going up, on the landing, everywhere. It's very inspiring for the mind. And so this one, it was a Sunday, and I was, doing the water bowls and practicing my mindfulness, just stay present with doing the water bowls, and very happily doing the water bowls. And then I go, oh, this mindfulness is so easy. Next second, I kid you not, crash. the bucket. So it had one of these little tables and the bucket of water that you used for the jug. It went crashing to the floor and water went everywhere. At the time, we had 2 sets of relics. Also, we did have the tours of Maitreya relics. We were talking about yesterday, Maitreya relics, Buddha Maitreya coming Buddha. And so we ended up those Maitreya relics from 2 tours going around. They were having a little break in between their tours. And so they were both in this room. And I thought, I haven't got the relics, have I? I haven't. They're in their cases. And then His Holiness throne, and then Lama Zopa's throne. And I'm like, oh, what have I done? And there's water everywhere. Not only that, Sunday's the day when the Vietnamese and the Chinese all come along to pay their respects. And I'm like, get the wet back. So it was a great lesson in not getting too cocky about mindfulness, right? It was really clear. I had a lot of work to do. Anyway. Okay, so doing the action, and then we have the culmination or the completion of the action. So the action has to be complete. That's why the one of killing the person, you've died before the other person in that example, then that's not a complete action of killing. You've got to have all these 4 to be complete. So just to give some examples, and these examples are in the Lamrim outlines. So we've got copies of this in the library. It's easy to find online, and it's the text that's used for the November course at Kopan Monastery for that. Yeah, and I really like it because it gives you a very simple summary of everything, very nicely laid out, very simple. Of course, there's much more elaborate commentaries about karma that we can get into, but this one just presents it very succinctly. Okay, so looking at these 4 elements, so in the action of killing, so we're going to look at non-virtuous actions. So the basis is a being other than yourself, a human being or a non-human being other than yourself. This is so as we discussed last week, suicide is not regarded as an action of killing, right? Because it has to be a being other than yourself. But you could know that the mind of a being committing suicide would be very disturbed, so there'd be heavy negative karma there. It'd be a very deluded state of mind that takes that action, right? So in this one, it has to be a being other than yourself. And so the attitude or, perception that you have is, you're wanting to kill. You recognize the perception, you recognize that unmistakably the actual person or being you intend to kill. So we have examples like currently, one example in the news, Alec Baldwin, isn't it? And so he's up for involuntary manslaughter, not for murder. Why? There was no intention to kill. So even in legal circumstances, we can say that they take into account intention, right? They don't take into account all the gradations in terms of karma, but they do take into account whether you intended to kill or whether you didn't intend to kill. So then it's a lesser deed in regular society legally. But in terms of karma, you'd say it wouldn't be a complete karmic action of killing, right? And so the motivation is you must have the intention to kill. And, I think we can think of many other examples, say in car accidents where somebody's killed. There was no intention to kill someone else. But it happened, right? So it's not a complete karmic action of killing. So it's good to think of examples, and if you have questions as we go along. I really loved all the questions last week. It was fantastic. And the state of mind. So let's say you had a virtuous state of mind. I think last week we talked a bit about euthanasia, particularly in relation to pets or so forth, so out of compassion, you want that being to not suffer anymore. Now, a Buddha would say you don't know the karma of that being, and maybe they have to experience that in their little doggy, cat, whatever bird body, so that they don't experience a worse pain and suffering in another life. You know, we talk about hot hells and cold hells and so forth like that, intense, unbearable suffering. And so we don't know, but is anyone a vet here? I know that if you go to the vet and say, you know, I don't want my dear beloved to have their life shortened. I want them to live out this life. They might think you're being cruel. And others might think you're being cruel too. But out of compassion, you really believe this is the best for them. So we could say that there's some virtuous karma in that action. There is still the intention. You see what I mean? But it's not as heavy as, say, out of anger, we see this tragically happening a lot, right? Isn't it? All these mass shootings and so forth. Whether out of anger, a lot out of anger. And so regardless of mass shootings, we could, out of anger, even slight irritation, it makes me scratch, kill a mosquito, isn't it? Oh, you damn mosquito. Have you ever just watched them taking their little drop of blood? It takes so long for the teeniest, tiniest little drop of blood. Wow. Now, I can say that safely living in an area where I know I'm not going to get a deadly disease from a mosquito. Right? A little bit more challenging if you're, you know, subject to malaria or so forth like that. Just take the medication. So out of attachment, you might kill an animal because you want the meat. You know, whether it's any animal, you want to eat that, you want to eat their meat, or you're really attached to that yummy taste, or an animal with fur, you want their fur, or so forth. You know, I think we've got a lot more awareness these days about that than a lot of places, than you know times before. I remember being in Namibia where ostrich farming probably still very big, and it was the meat, it was the fur, it was the, it was the birds don't have fur, do they? I guess. Feathers, the plumes, and oil. Like we have emu oil, and I'm like, poor emu. And I think, huh? The skin's oily, but the only way, yeah. So every little bit of the ostrich was used. You could say that at least every bit was being used. It wasn't just killed for one thing, maybe. Or out of ignorance that you think, well, animals are placed on this earth to serve us with food. That's their job, you know, or, you know, we could use that example. Or, you know, as I'm not sure it still happens, animal sacrifice. We had that even in a Christian tradition, isn't it? So there can be all sorts of motivations for killing. When we were at we had the Guru Bumsog, which is all these offerings to Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava up here, and the Tanka. And so we're down in Hobart, and it was during the time of Dark Mofo, the winter festival. And so there was a whole controversy. One of the artistic acts was killing a cow. Like, how can that be artistic? That was an artistic act, and there was so much protest against it. They didn't stop it. What they did was make the venue private, so only those people who knew. It's pretty horrific, isn't it? How can slaughtering an animal be an act of art? Gratuitous. That was, yeah, and it's not for any beneficial reason, just gratuitous killing. Bullfighting, yeah, many examples. Yes, well,
different karma for, like in bullfighting, for the bullfighter and the people attending of different degrees. Like also, to say, for example, the vet, there's one level of karma for the person having good intention. Good intention,
but you could say the vet also has good intention. The vet believes this is going to relieve them of their suffering.
Because he's doing that daily.
Regularly. So you could say it may be a complete karma of killing with it, but there's still some of the conditions, the heaviness we talk about is less because your motivation is a positive one. And we would say that would be an example of out of ignorance believing that this is going to relieve them of suffering. And of course, in the traditions of society, if you're just thinking about one life, you could say it is relieving them of suffering in this life. But with a longer term perspective, karmically we say, well, actually, we don't know that. We don't know that. Right.
Could you also take into account the fact that within a lot of what the vet does relieves suffering?
Yes, because you can see a vet will do everything they can, just like in our medical profession, to save that life, right? Before they decide, it's come to the end of its life.
But with any other aspect, it might not be a life to an animal. They practice some kind of veterinary science, which will alleviate all this stuff.
Yes. And that's virtuous. That's act of karma. Well, each karmic act has its own karma. Yeah. So you could say, and this is the thing, we talk about individual examples as sort of standalone isolates, but that's what you're raising is, well, what about the other conditions that are there? So you could say at the same time, so we say this thing, in one finger snap, there's 64 moments of karma, right? So many things are happening at the same time. Yeah. Good. Okay, so, all right, so you kill you carry out the deed by whatever means, if you've got a weapon. Fortunately, we still have, are you allowed to have guns in Australia? Only on farms or, right? License, yeah. So there's enough out there, or poison, or whatever means that you do. It's both directly or indirectly by getting someone else to kill. So you can think of all those army leaders and world leaders sending, like the situation in Ukraine and Russia at the moment, that you're getting other people to kill, and they kill, as we see, there's a lot of people killed in that war, and that's creating huge karma for that person or persons who commanded the killing, let alone the one doing the act. But the one who's commanded the killing, it's like double whammy. It's the karma of killing plus of having got someone else to kill. So you've got sort of double whammy there.
I also say farmers who raise animals for the meat trade.
Yes.
So they have that, and then also the abattoir workers and the
Yes.
people
Yes.
recognise abattoirs,
Yes.
same thing.
Same thing. And yeah, many different situations.
Theologically, I mean, how much personal responsibility do you have with asking for those two? It's probably an impossible question, but is there also a kind of
Say I rejoice in the fact that all these people are going off to war and killing others, then it's not the karma of killing, but I'm rejoicing in that, which is one of the, 4 things that, yeah, great, they're killing. So I have to be very careful. So we can do, it is very complicated. And so, for example, different war situations, we've had protests, haven't we? Or we've banned, the country is like the situation in India where, Indonesia, where we saw graphic details of animals being slaughtered. That was horrendous. And so for that period of time, we banned that import from Indonesia. So the country did something. Individually, what we can do is yes, we can protest. We can write letters, petitions, so forth. We might have some power to do something more, of course. So in Queens, at Chenrezig Institute a few years ago, Geshe Sultram was leading the Lamrim retreat, which is every January, 2-week retreat. To keep in mind for those of you wishing to complete discovering Buddhism, that's one place you can go, or to Kangaroo Islands, a date on it. Anyway, we can talk about that more in the future. Anyway, so Geshe said, maybe day 1, if 20 people in this room commit to going vegetarian, I will too, right? But he said not till after March 10th, I think it was, which is a significant day for the Tibetans. But the reason he said that was his family, who hadn't seen him for a long time, he was going to India and his family were coming from Tibet, and he was going to celebrate with the family who are all meat eaters. Why? The conditions of Tibet, what can grow and so forth. So anyway, so he made that commitment, and a few years later I said, Geshe, you're eating meat. And he said, I only made that commitment for a year. But we've had that, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, always from time to time through FPMT, make a pledge to not eat meat or so forth. So how does that have an effect? We might say it's a little bit indirect. But we see that now that, certain percentage of the population, it's sort of supply and demand, or demand and supply, people adjust, producers adjust. So that's about animals. About war situations, I guess it's, we want to, we actually, Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, did some powerful prayers for averting war, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche has us recite those. So I think we're going to be doing some more of that, because it seems to be there's more and more conflict happening in the world, and whatever we can do to benefit. So, and we can't diminish or think small about what that benefit is. We may not even see it in our lifetime, but over lifetimes, because again, the virtuous karma of that is so powerful. So, we want to see immediate results. Otherwise it's like, how do I know it works? But karma works over lifetimes. Yeah. Yes, by driving you to the center. Yes, he is accumulating positive karma. In fact, I've heard some students, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who, she is that, her husband's not Buddhist either, and even her boss should say, you know, when she wanted time off for some dharmic activity, and to say, just think of all the positive karma you're creating. She would just remind them. Yes, so you can safely reassure him, keep driving. Okay. All right. So that's your motivation. So, and then, yeah, you carry it out. That's where we got up to. We had this situation, it mentions all by black magic. Now, I haven't heard of black magic really happening in the world today, but I'm not saying it doesn't. But we have the famous story of Milarepa in Tibet, who, you know, out of his family taking revenge on the village because they'd lost property. I can't remember the whole story, and so he went to black magic school, go figure, and learned how to work with the elements in a negative way. So given that we have lamas who can work with the elements in a positive way, of course, if your motivation's opposite, you can. And so creating hurricanes and so forth that demolished the village and killed, mass murdered, basically. Of course, he then met his teacher, Mapa, who set him on the right track, and not to go into the whole story, but was able to purify by his devotion to Mapa and doing whatever he said, enough he actually became enlightened in that same lifetime. I tell you, when I talk to the prisoners that we visit or write to with the Liberation Prison Project, they love that story. It's just like, oh, I haven't done that. There's hope for me yet. And so, yeah, as we said, the completion as the other person dies before you do. And on top of that, whether you rejoice in the action. So, for example, I was many years ago going for a retreat at Chenrezig Institute, and I was getting up to have breakfast, and I walk up the steps and I trod on a little lizard. I tried to convince myself it was still alive because it was moving while its stomach was hanging out, and you know, it was definitely dead. So there was no intention to kill. The act of killing happened, the contact of my foot with the lizard. But I took it in and I took it up to the altar and did practices for it. We can take holy images and circumambulate them around holy images, say mantras, and then like Om Mani Padme Hum and blow, and you know, wish for their virtuous rebirth, you know, best possible outcome, and do all of that. So it's not that wasn't a complete karma of killing. It was a complete action of mindfulness, but not mindlessness, but not of killing. So there's some karma there. And then the next thing I did was pour a glass of water, and then I saw there was an ant drowning in the water, and I'm like, I'm a danger to the world, and it's only 5 a.m., you know. This is disastrous. A lot to purify that day. But I noticed we could be doing these things and not noticing. Okay. So some other examples, the action of stealing. So the action of stealing or taking what is not given. In other words, I think it's good to say, hands off what's not yours, right? And then you'll avoid that one if it's not yours. My fellow Theravadan monk and nun friends, I so admire that they take this really, really disciplined, that they won't, so that apparently even say this page, even lifting one corner is like, you're not yet taking, but it's a danger zone. So they would avoid doing that. You know, they wouldn't even lift a piece of paper, or, you know, if it's not yours. I was on a committee with, anyway, one of the Theravada monks in Sydney, and I thought, well, he doesn't lift it, but he certainly reads it. There's no Nothing to say don't read what's on the page. But I find that pretty remarkable because it keeps you mindful that, oh, yeah, this is not mine, don't touch. So to complete a fault of stealing, it's taking something of value to another person or being. So given that's a, sliding scale that we don't know, okay, a billionaire might not notice, that you've stolen a dollar from them, but someone penniless or someone homeless or whatever would notice that. So that would be of value. But you have to think again, what's the intention why you're engaging in that activity. So the basis is something of value to someone else, to another, or to another being, right? And so you recognize the object of that you wish to take, and so you intend to take that. Even before taking, it's like the mind that grasps at that, it already, this is mine. And so you intend to steal. It's not just that, you forgot to pay or so forth. I remember one time in Sydney at a petrol station, and I literally forgot to pay, and I started going out. It was a petrol station I went to all the time, and I started driving out, and I wasn't outside of their boundary, and I went, I haven't paid. So you sort of pull over, and I went back in and paid, and they said, and I said, did you see I almost left? Yes. And I said, what would you have done if I actually left? And they said, call the police. I said, phew. It was the place I always went to. No exceptions. Okay. So you intend to steal, not just forgetting. And so it might be out of anger, taking something from someone because you want to hurt them, so you take something of value to them, or mainly out of attachment. I think this is the main reason, because we want to have that thing, or or out of ignorance, thinking that it's okay. For example, taking flowers from a public park or something, or from the neighbours. Sometimes the neighbours will say, please help yourself. That's a different matter. But if they haven't said that and you just think, oh, I like that, I'll take that. Be careful. Yeah. So this one, I think, could be easy to commit this fault. So you take the object. So this is the performance of the deed. You take it by whatever means, secretly, or not paying taxes, not paying fines, fees, so forth, misusing donations. That would be heavy, so that if we misuse donations that were made to this centre, then it's a Dharma centre. It's for the promotion of the Dharma. And so that would be very heavy, negative karma. Or again, you could be getting someone to steal something for you. Again, that double whammy. Or stealing time from an employer. There's so many different ways that we can steal. I know quite a few people who lost their jobs because they were on other committees and organisations and so forth, and doing that work in their paid work job. Many people that happens to. And we can have a, slippery slope around that too. And it's very easy to think, oh, well, I did it once, I'll do it again. Okay, my boss doesn't matter, doesn't care, just as long as I get my work done, I'm done. But yeah. So and I think with that comes that sense of it's mine, it's now mine. So I own it. Pretty awful. Okay, so yes.
Very interesting to know about intention.
Yes,
and
intention.
motivation.
Yeah.
So my question is, if someone is clearly aware of intention and motivation and commit something and they get something negative done, on the other hand, if someone is not aware of this motivation, the effects of motivation and intention, someone who is not clear about this thing and ignorant of all this awareness of what is right and what is wrong, perhaps the person who is ignorant would not gain much of negative karma.
Sadly, karma, that's not true. Karma is a natural law of cause and effect, whether you believe in it or not. So even animals are creating karma. You know, the sharks and whales who eat, you know, volumes of fish every day for breakfast. They're mass killing. So yes, even you're not aware of it, it's still, you still accumulate that karma. That's how we've all operated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime after lifetime until we met the Dharma, where there was this life or previous life and so forth. It's a difference if there's no intention at all. That is a difference. But if it's an intention to kill and just you don't believe in karma, then you still have that. So if there's no intention to kill, you'd say there's no, regardless of whether you heard about karma or not, then you would say you wouldn't have a complete action of killing. So you'd have some negative karma, but it wouldn't be a complete karma of killing. And that gets important when we look at, well, what are the results of doing these actions, which we'll look at in subsequent weeks. So,
yeah, I'm just feeling sharp now.
go for it.
I actually don't have a concept of feeling, I have a concept of being myself. So I have no intention to feel what I see as feeling. All I have is an intention to consume something to satisfy my urge to eat.
Right. So we could say that's that ignorance, not knowing here is another being with Buddha nature, and thinking, oh, this is a good thing to do because it's good for me. And I think, I don't know what examples you're thinking of in terms of killing yourself, but given that, so this is the thing, the Buddha never said, don't eat meat, right? So you could say you buy from the butcher or whatever, somebody's already killed. It's not your karma of killing, but here it is available to eat. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, any being that we eat parts of their body, we have a karmic connection with. And so we have mantras to say for them, even you're eating meat or so forth. I mean, the Dalai Lama has been told from time to time to eat meat, right? And for health. I remember Geshe Dawa telling a couple of students, you must eat meat. Now, they don't eat it every day, but they do eat every week, let's say. So there's a lot of different conditions that come into that, you know, and that's when we start to look at karma and say, oh, it's so very, very complicated, right? So even we could look at medicines that have bits of beings in it. I remember my doctor in Sydney, and she just say, have I talked to you about, what is it, for bones? Glucosamine. And this was years ago. And so she said, have I talked to you about glucosamine? And I said, yes. And I've talked to you about shark fins. So but now you can get, you know, I don't know how it works with cornstarch, but it works for me. So, so anyway. Yeah.
get fish for their nutrition, for their food, but not sort of, you know, buy it in big lots or whatever.
Sustenance.
Just to catch it.
Yeah.
Sustenance, catch it yourself, that's allowed. I'm not making them buy that.
No, catching for yourself, for sustenance. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if we look at the Theravadan tradition, there's very much like, in terms of, I'll talk about in terms of the ordained Sangha, monks and nuns, which is what I know about. So if you're offered, say you were offered meat, then you accept it, right? And so that is in part of our vows. What I liked about at both Bodhiana and Dhammasara here is that, you know, when people are offering dana, it's clearly labelled what has meat and what doesn't. So in that situation, you can choose. But yeah, so there is that proviso. And you'd still have to say, you know, that would they have a complete karma of killing, you know, and so forth, and what would be, there would be some karma involved there, whether it's a complete action of killing, depends on their motivation, depends on their, you know, the completion of that deed. I'm sure they wouldn't be rejoicing that the fish are dead, right? So anyway, it's a tricky situation because we have to live, you know.
It seems like really, it's kind of mind-boggling, really.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, isn't it?
But it seems like you could easily wander into.
We're wandering into this web of negativity all the time. This is what's called samsara.
Is the dialogue. I mean, it's kind of about, you know, the creation of the world. There are creatures that live.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
So you say your entire origin is based on that karma.
This is why we're in samsara, which is a suffering cycle of existence, right? Because all those are, you could say, are conditions that in that being's body you've got to eat, I don't know, insects or whatever you've got to eat. And as those beings, like we as human beings, we can make decisions about what we eat, what we don't eat, and so forth. Even, I remember, you know, when I was in hospital a couple of years ago, and I think it was the first time ever I'd gone to see a dietitian. It was part of the rehab package I had for my knee. And I said, and she said, okay, what do you eat? And we never didn't get past breakfast, and she said, I can tell you already you're not eating enough protein. I said, is this where you tell me to eat meat? And she said, absolutely not. There's a lot of vegetarian protein. So, you know, we're so fortunate that we have those conditions in this world today. And even in this world, not everybody has those conditions. My friends in Namibia, it was beef and some very limp-looking vegetables and millet. Now, I don't think you can survive just on a millet diet. I think you might get a few diseases, yeah. So,
Do you think that, I mean, because we can't know everything,
yes.
you think you also have to cultivate a certain acceptance that you are doing stuff that is, you know, I mean,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We do what we can to being aware to mitigate the negative fallout, and keep in mind that the Buddha said there's nothing that can't be purified. We haven't got onto the purification practices. Yeah, so we can do the purification, both ends. Yes, if you like, both ends. It comes back to the mindfulness, doesn't it? That we can say, okay, so even, as I said, even eating meat, you know, we have mantras to say for that being. We think, oh, now I have a karmic connection. Now I'm going to lead you to enlightenment. You know, thinking like that is quite profound.
I'm thinking of the
That's it.
legends on fossils and thinking.
I read them
I
obsessively.
think that comes like reading all the contents and kind of everything that you're.
I know, it's interesting. I was once in a country town and went to one of those, you know, Chinese cafe restaurant things that seem to be a lot in country towns, and being a vegetarian, whatever. And so it's like everything has oyster sauce. And my friend said to me, no oyster's gone anywhere near that bottle, you know. There is some of that, you know, but I'm one of those pain in the necks that says, what are the ingredients of this?
The intention of doing your best enough.
Well, you do your best and then your best gets better. Our skillful means of, yeah, so what I'm hearing is don't whip yourself up, you know, don't whip yourself. It's a matter of being aware and how can I do things a little bit differently? How can, and when you start thinking like that, we're very creative, you know, that different opportunities come to mind as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting thing about eating meat. So I'm eating meat and then someone else kills the meat. So he is killing the meat because I'm eating. And I am paying it to buy the meat. So ultimately, the effect is on me because I'm encouraging the thing and I'm paying for it. So it's a bit of a
minefield, isn't it?
and also if you look at the Islam religion, they say halal food.
Yes.
Permissible.
Yeah.
Even in the church, they are very particular. I think the very little understanding I have is they kill the animal in a certain way.
Yes.
So it doesn't give much of a pain to the animal, so you can't control it.
Yeah.
They are very particular about it. So it seems this karma is there. It's spread.
There you go. All you meat eaters eat halal meat. But this is a situation that, you know, from your reasoning was, I think I'd been vegetarian on and off since I had control over what I was eating as a teenager. So, but thinking like that, thinking that, well, okay, I haven't done the killing, but if I'm eating the meat, that means somebody killed it. And if I can be part of, it doesn't mean they killed it directly for me to eat, but for human beings to eat. Or they probably don't mind if animals eat them as long as someone buys it. And so, therefore, I use that reasoning as somebody who could sustain my body without having to eat meat to say, well, don't contribute to the demand. You know, for myself, that's a personal choice. You know, we've all got to look at what other conditions, because that's also a result of karma as well. What other conditions we find ourselves in, find our body in, and so forth. It's very, very, it is complex, yeah. So,
It seems like it's probably a sort of blunting too of a sensibility about life in general. How we live.
Yeah.
You know, a child often has a real sense that this isn't a live creature, and I don't want to. I mean, they can have opposite intentions too.
but generally, they don't want to kill creatures. Yeah.
Lots of great respect and ritual around an animal.
Yeah.
We just don't experience.
No.
Not like that.
And it's men's business. So the men do it, which is interesting.
I suppose I'm saying it seems like.
But they're doing it for survival as well.
Yeah.
So yes, the intention is to eat and to feed the community. But this is, I guess, some of the qualms that we live with because we're in this samsaric condition where, you know, we don't have to think about creating negativity. It just sort of happens, if you like. But on the other hand, for people who eat meat or have eaten meat and so forth, we have animal liberation where we're saving lives. So it's not saying, I'm not saying, you know, save this many lives and then you're okay to eat meat. I'm not saying like that. But given it is an opposite action to killing beings, is to save lives, right? Whether one's a doctor or a vet, or whether one does animal liberation and we all go out and get some crayfish and release them somewhere. Why not? You know, I mentioned about being at Rinpoche's house in Aptos. On the 8th and the 5th, today's the 8th of the Tibetan month, and then the 15th and the 30th. So 3 times a month we did animal liberation. Every month. So it was pretty profound. Some people have made it a life practice. One of my, a nun friend, she's in Washington, she's American, but she was in New Zealand at the time, and she'd previously been a scientist in a lab that, you know, sacrificed many beings every day. And Rinpoche gave her this practice of, I can't remember how many water bowl offerings as purification of that, which she did. You know, she wasn't anymore working in the science lab, and she'd met the Dharma, and it was like, okay. So we have these acts of purification, but it's not to have the, like I said last week, like my little 4-year-old Catholic girl who thought, okay, well, I can confess and then I can do anything and confess again and do it again and confess again. Didn't understand karma, obviously, wasn't taught that. Yvonne, you had it.
Oh, I just wanted to, it's not my question, I just wanted to ask about, I think, fostering and adopting animals from shelter.
Fostering, adopting animals from shelters, saving them from being killed, absolutely. Yep.
And how our negative karma has brought us about, and our greed really, wanting all these animals and eat these animals. But anyway, pandemic has come about, and now
I personally, I couldn't say what karmically was the cause, you know, for us as human beings to experience a pandemic. That we have a collective karma. In other words, that karma for all of us human beings ripened at the same time.
But now we have gone on, we were fortunate to be able to develop vaccines. But in the process of developing them, we have sacrificed billions of animals.
Yes. Yes.
So how do we take those karmic consequences?
Yeah. We purify whatever we can. You know, that's what we can do, is purify whatever we can. I mean, I haven't heard that anybody so far, even in a Dharma setting, that said they didn't, you know, those who chose not to get vaccinated. I haven't heard anyone say because so many, you know, billions of beings were killed for that. So this is where with our medicines, we don't know a lot of the time, right? So we take medicines to save our lives. If we have options, I mean, glucosamine is an easy option, but there are other things that are not easy options. So, you know, it's just developing more and more awareness, and what we can do, as you're saying, you know, is good enough, doing our best, good enough. Well, yes, we have the best intention, we do whatever we can. You know.
So if you really
yeah.
And you still have a lot of suffering, how do you reconcile that?
So it said that what we're experiencing now is a result of past karma, so from past lives, and that ripens now. What we're creating the cause for is for future karmic experiences. Yeah. So even though at times, you know, when we say, oh, you know, we feel a direct cause and effect, of course there is some. If I get angry at someone and they get angry back at me, right, I've created that situation for them to be angry back at me. But we could say that can be a ripening of past karma, but I'm also creating the cause for that to happen again and again and again. So that's, if we think forward, then we think, oh, be careful, be mindful, you know, watch what we do. Yeah. So
is there any explanation for how karma actually works? Like, is it to do, like, we talk about intention here,
yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
and then there's a
Physical, yeah, either something we do or say. But even at the level of thinking, yes.
Are we talking about? Are we talking like molecular subatomic sort of levels that you hear? I'm just trying to get.
Okay, so
just
yeah.
A sense of
So
like gravity or you know.
I don't know about gravity. I think gravity is not a. I do understand what you're saying. So we say that why we don't fully understand karma is that it's a very subtle phenomenon. And therefore, I do personally think about it at that very energetic level of energy. So, for example, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, you know, and as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you recite 10 malas of Om Mani Padme Hum. Any being that encounters your skin, any being that encounters the air that has touched your skin, when you go into waterways and so forth, you know, go for a swim, any being there is blessed by that. So we can't see that. It's but we can know that energy does work at that level. And we can say, well, I know that my reciting my 10 malas of Om Mani Padme Hum, even thinking it benefits others, certainly benefits me. So that we feel energized by that. So I think there's a lot at that level of energy that we're not aware of. We're not aware of even at the very manifest level a lot of the time. But I think, you know, we can train our minds to become more and more aware, isn't it? Definitely. Yeah, great. All right. Okay, so I'll go on with a couple more examples, if you like. Yeah, so action of sexual misconduct. So sexual misconduct is generally described, the fault of sexual misconduct is described as cheating with someone you know to be in a committed relationship or cheating on your partner. It's basically cheating in a, you know, sometimes they're all in a committed relationship, right? Because it makes sense, because no matter what people tell themselves, 1, 2, or more people get hurt, depending on how many kids and other relatives there are on either side. So the basis or object here is an inappropriate partner. In other words, someone else's partner, or it can also be with a relative, like what do we say? A parent or incest, a sibling, that's right, incest, or a child who hasn't consented, or anyone who hasn't consented, actually, or with someone who's taken vows of celibacy, such as us. Don't worry, we're untouchable. Remember one time,
be careful what you say.
no, I had so far, like I had this, that's true, karma could change. But I had this situation when I was in the US, and anyway, this person who drove me to the airport when I was leaving, and unbeknownst to me, when I got out of the car, professed love for me of that variety. And I said, well, you're obviously not very serious, because I'm a nun and I'm sober. And I'm leaving the country, so bye. But I did cease contact with them just in case that fueled some sort of anything. Yeah. So, and of course, for us as ordained people, any sexual activity would be breaking that. So that would be a misconduct for us, but that's, you haven't taken vows of celibacy. So then the perception or thought, the attitude of mind. So you identify correctly the object of your misconduct, probably the object of your desire, and you intend to engage in sexual act with them, right? And you do it. So you do the deed. Yeah, so I get a bit sheepish about explaining the deed, but I think you get what the deed is. So it could be, tragically, it could be out of anger or deluded sense of power, like rape that occurs in war situations, that as a sort of tool of torture or power or control or something. Out of attachment, obviously that's going to be the most frequent one. Or out of ignorance, thinking that it's cool, you know. Remember friends of mine years ago that said, oh, polygamy is great. They weren't of any particular religion that promoted polygamy or anything like that. But I always just thought, no, people do get hurt. Or engaging in sexual activity because you think you're going to get enlightened that way. I have met people like that too. You get more and more attached and more naughty. So then the completion of the act is, the deed is complete, right? Completion of the action. Okay. No questions about that one?
Oh, just think of the completion, it's that, oh, I've done that, oh, I'm really happy I've done that.
Well, you're in bliss because you've done that.
Those people that are taking their vows will not know. They're not, you know, when you take
8 precepts.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. That would be, yes, so that would be engaging in a sexual act at that, on those days when you take the precepts, would be doing this completion of the act. Yeah. It gets a lot more technical. There's all these things about in a sacred place on certain days of the lunar year, month, and so forth, so forth. And I was one time in Chenrezig Institute and teaching, and like everyone like you, and this couple came in and they looked like they were about to make out right there. And I'm like, please leave. Like, go somewhere else. Because coming on to into a Dharma center, the agreement generally is we don't engage in any form of sexual activity, and partly because, you know, there are ordained sangha and so forth that, yeah. Anyway, don't do it. Yes.
Is there respectful clothes that one has to wear for Dharma center? That's not provocative.
Basically that. We do say, in looking around, we do say, you know, I know it's hot, to cover our knees and to and shoulders, like to have. I'm not criticizing anyway. Not necessarily sleeves. I don't know. Cover our shoulders a bit. There you go. You've got a shawl. Some people bring shawls to put over their knees, just to put over the knees when you're sitting down. So male or female. Yeah. Some. Yeah. Since you asked. There used to be, there's somewhere our Gompa etiquette, which explains those things, yeah. Yeah. I know at Chenrezig Institute, because we have there was a lot of yoga classes and people get offended, not because the body wasn't covered, but the lycra tights were a bit, some people felt a bit put off by that, a bit too revealing. Not the yoga people. Anyway, it's in the mind of the perceiver too. So yeah, I think in Hindu temples, like for women, you have to wear like a skirt or so forth. It's all, yes, it is absolutely all in the mind of the perceiver. That's true. Okay, so we've only got a few more minutes, so maybe I'll just do one more. Yeah. Okay, so we have in relation to speech, I think in relation to speech, you thought those were hard. In relation to speech, there's a lot more possibility to create negative karma. You know, we say, oh, it just came out, I don't know where it came from. Again, it came from not being mindful. So lying, okay, this is one of the non-virtues of speech, which is okay, so we'll start with the basis. Another person who can understand you and who can speak. Interesting, isn't it? Another person who can understand you and who can speak. In other words, they understand your intention. So you must know what you're saying is untrue. So the other day, somebody sent me a text and saying, after a teaching, and said, oh, straight away, you know, we're talking about that, and straight away, I told a porky. And it's like, well, actually, no, it wasn't, because they just mistook a date, you know, this day, Monday or Tuesday, you know, they just made a mistake. There was no intention to lie or deceive, and it didn't deceive. That's part of it. So the person has to know what you're saying is untrue. I mean, no, delete. You must know what you're saying is untrue. You intend to lie, you intend to deceive. No, that's your intention. I always thought that, you know, before I took the individual liberation Pratimoksha vows, I always thought lying was the one I was always going to, you know, I couldn't take. For example, what would get me is, I'm sure I'm going to have a sickie and I won't be sick. You know, that would be lying to deceive, right? So it does make you think about those things. Now you can have mental health days. I think you can just say it's a mental health day. I'm not sure. Anyway, so your intention is to deceive. Your intention is to lie. You might be lying out of anger to destroy somebody's reputation or so forth. Or out of attachment to get something that you want, or out of ignorance, thinking it's okay to lie, to deceive, that's okay. People do it all the time. You know, it can be like that. And so then the deed is that, so that you do convince someone what you know to be untrue, they believe to be true. They've got to believe it. You've tried to deceive them and they've been deceived. So that could be through speaking, it could be through writing, could be on social media, could be emails, could be, I don't know, an affidavit. Could be a photo, I guess. Yeah. Oh yeah, you fake the photo. Yeah. Yes.
Sins of omission.
Yes, omission. Yeah. So by not correcting a situation that you know to be a lie. Okay. And the completion is the other person understands you and understands and believes your lie. Okay. Is that program on TV, isn't it? Would I lie to you? And I've got to work out if they're lying or not. I don't know. I don't know how serious it is. So I guess, so subsequently, we're going to be looking at things like what the karmic fallout of these things. One of the ones about lying is that, and that we might, if we experience it in this life, no matter when we're telling the truth, that still people don't believe you. You're telling the truth, but people don't believe you. So we could say that's a ripening of past karma of lying and wishing to deceive people. So this is where it's at an energetic level, because there would be no reason, why do I believe this person and why don't I believe that person? Unless I know them to be a constant liar. And if we sort of will go, well, I don't know if I can believe that person. It could be out of attachment of wanting, you know, people to feel sorry for you. Yeah. Or it could be out of wanting to gain, you know, I was just thinking, when you're, you know, people are migrating from one country to another, unfortunately, generally there's a tendency to make it as difficult as possible for people to do that. So then people could turn to lying or faking things and so forth to be able to do that. Okay. Okay. One more. Yeah. No, maybe. Yes. Go. Questions. Social media or social, for example. Yeah. They're the hardest. The little white lies, and we think, oh, it's okay. So is your intention to deceive, or is your intention not to harm? So that's not a complete karma of lying, because you haven't intended to deceive. So for example, I remember one student saying, when their wife said, do I look good in this outfit, your new outfit? His response was, darling, you, no matter what you wear, you look beautiful to me. So he wasn't lying. Very skillful. So if you hear your partner saying that, they come to Karma 101. Well, they don't want to harm by saying, actually, it looks terrible. But it might be more helpful to say, actually, it looks terrible. See, so Yvonne.
That you're saying that to your wife because you don't want to upset her, or is your motivation truly that you don't want her?
We have to check up with ourselves. Yes, truly knowing. Yeah, it's really hard for us to know truly our motivation, isn't it? Isn't it? So yeah, so we probably in our motivation, and there can be a lot of mixed things. Stripy karma happens. A bit of good. Probably most of our karma is stripy. Stick with the white stripes, they say. Yeah, so it's very, very tricky, but it's good to think like that, because in that situation where I go, is my motivation actually pure? Well, probably as long as we're in samsara, I can't say it's 100% pure, but I'm doing my best. Doing my best, and that's all we can hope for. And what do you do then? Rejoice. You know, rejoice, rejoice that you did that.
And there's also the thing, not so much lying, but say something's irritating you about this other person. Finding a way of navigating that, like being able to communicate in a way that is useful to both of you, rather than helpful.
Yeah. The first thing for us to do is look at our own irritation.
Like,
before.
Yes.
Yes. And take little baby steps. Like I had a work colleague who who was bad-mouthing me to the boss, lying. And so every morning on the way to work, I'd just practice being very harmonious, you know, sort of rehearsing what I was going to say when I got to work to the one who was lying, enough to get me past her office and into mine. That was good enough, you know, and just taking little baby steps. Of course, I didn't, in that situation, I was probably a bit upset, but I also thought, I got tenure. I did.
Yeah.
She didn't have tenure, I had tenure. So it's like, she can say whatever she likes about me. And of course, over time, I didn't know, but over time, the boss could see what was going on. But, you know, so we just, you know, make little baby steps along the way, and we rehearse for that. Look at our own irritation first and going, where is this irritation coming from? What are my expectations of how this person should interact with me, and, you know, and so forth. Yeah. So it makes us more mindful then. Good. Okay, we'll leave it there for today. Again, wonderful discussions and questions and so forth. So we'll dedicate on page 16, and so that this is all the virtuous karma that we've created in this time, which is huge, which we can't even imagine, gets sealed, not to be destroyed. So whatever happens subsequently. And so after the Idam Guru Ratna mantra, through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Page 19, long life prayers. So for our precious lamas, thinking that, you know, Tara Day, long life day, even more long life. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Page 22. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serves as the bountiful bearer of all sustaining, preserving and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers, honouring the three jewels, saviour of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you very much. And we got everyone's emails to add to our list. So those who haven't received the notes, we'll send them out to you.